Imagine standing close enough to feel the air move. Not a breeze, not wind, a shock wave, 100 meters of straight asphalt, a June sky burning white over Tuscany. And then it arrives. A motorcycle. No, a projectile. Something that barely touches the earth as it tears past at 366 kilometers per hour, 227 miles per hour. A human being, strapped to nothing but instinct, wrapped in leather and carbon fiber, moving at a speed where mistakes don't get second chances. This is MotoGP, not a sport, a reckoning, a war between engineers who refuse to accept impossible and riders who refuse to accept enough. This is the story of 15 motorcycles that redefined speed at the absolute edge of two-wheeled racing. From the final screaming two-strokes to the machines that shattered every limit the sport thought it understood. This is the pursuit of something no one has ever truly reached, the absolute limit. So let's count them down. Number 15, the last war cry. Before the modern era, before electronics, before aerodynamics worth mentioning, before any machine on this list was a drawing on an engineer's tablet, there was this. The Yamaha YZR500, 2 strokes, 500 cubic centimeters, 185 horsepower screaming from a frame that weighed barely 130 kilograms. No traction control, no launch control, no rider aids beyond talent, muscle memory, and sheer terrifying nerve. In 1999, Max Biaggi piloted one of these machines down the Mugello Strait and clocked 318 kilometers per hour on a 500cc motorcycle. That speed was not just extraordinary, it was a warning from the past, a declaration that the two-stroke era had pushed the laws of physics to a breaking point. The power delivery was savage, sudden, unpredictable. It exploded into a violent, shrieking peak and fell away just as suddenly. Riders called it the Widowmaker, and they were not joking. The legends this machine produced are unforgettable. Valentino Rossi, Max Biaggi, Kenny Roberts Jr., Loris Capirossi, riders who wrestled monsters and called it art. But by 2001, the FIM had made its decision. The two-stroke era was over. The YZR500 did not disappear quietly. It screamed, and in screaming, it set a standard the new era would take years to surpass. When you are on the edge is the only place that exists. The bike does not know what safe means. Kenny Roberts Sr. Number 14, the Pioneer. The year is 2002. Honda arrives not with a compromise, but with a declaration of intent. The RC211V, a 5-cylinder 990cc 4-stroke producing over 240 horsepower. A V5 configuration no manufacturer had dared attempt. 3 cylinders at the front of the V, 2 at the rear, an asymmetric symphony of engineering arrogance. The sound was like nothing in racing, a layered, almost musical scream that did not belong on Earth. In that debut season, Honda test rider Toru Ukawa clocked 324.5 kilometers per h on the Mugello Strait, the first official speed record of the modern MotoGP era. By comparison, the fastest two-stroke had reached 318 kilometers per h. In one season, the 4-stroke era had already surpassed it. The RC211V dominated everything in its path. Valentino Rossi won back-to-back titles in 2002 and 2003. Nicky Hayden closed the 990cc chapter with the 2006 championship. But buried in that dominance was a warning. MotoGP was getting dangerously fast. Braking distances were shrinking into territory that terrified engineers. For 2007, the FIM acted. Engine displacement was cut from 990cc to 800cc. The era of unrestricted power was over, but the speed would not stop climbing. We put a lot of time into analyzing every detail for these documentaries. We're incredibly grateful for the community that makes these deep dives possible. If you're enjoying the breakdown, consider supporting the channel directly with a super thanks. Number 13. The Doctor's Weapon. There is a moment in 2004 that motorcycle racing will never forget. Valentino Rossi, the reigning champion, already a legend, walked away from Honda and signed for Yamaha, a team that had not won a championship since 1992. The machine waiting for him was the YZR M1, not the fastest in raw top speed. Its inline-4 produced slightly less horsepower than the Honda V5, but the M1 had what the RC211V sometimes lacked: balance, unity between engine character and chassis behavior, a tractability that let Rossi place the bike exactly where he needed, corner by corner, lap by lap. Rossi won the championship in his very first season at Yamaha, stunning the paddock and proving a principle that still defines MotoGP. In the right hands, a great all-round motorcycle will always challenge one that is simply the fastest down a straight. The M1 was never about the speed trap. It was about laps, championships, and a philosophy of performance Yamaha would carry forward for 2 decades.
I try to have a different relationship with the bike. This is not only a piece of metal, there is a soul. The bike talks back too, but not with a voice, with the components. Valentino Rossi. Number 12. The Brave Challenger. Every great arms race has its brave challenger, the one who enters the fight knowing the odds and still shows up with everything it has. In MotoGP during the 2000s, that challenger was Kawasaki. The Ninja ZXRR was outgunned on paper. Kawasaki did not have Honda's budget or Yamaha's depth. Their trellis frame was unique in the paddock, their inline-4 developed with limited resources. Top speed hovered in the 310 to 315 kilometers per h range, regularly out-dragged on the straights. The ZXRR never threatened a championship, but it was part of the story. It showed that MotoGP's barriers were not just financial, they were engineering. Speed at this level required not just money, but mastery. When Kawasaki withdrew at the end of 2008, there was genuine sadness in the paddock. The ZXRR was never the fastest motorcycle on the grid, but it earned its place in the fight. Number 11. The Red Dawn. In 2003, something happened at the Italian Grand Prix at Mugello that made every engineer in the Honda and Yamaha garages stop and stare. A red motorcycle, producing a sharp, rasping, high-pitched snarl from a V4 using Ducati's legendary desmodromic valve system, blasted down the main straight and into the history of the sport. The Ducati Desmosedici had arrived. Loris Capirossi gave Ducati their first Premier Class win at Catalunya that year. Their motorcycle was built not on the Japanese philosophy of balance and refinement, but on Italian aggression, passion, and the absolute pursuit of maximum engine output. The desmodromic valve system, where valves are mechanically opened and closed rather than relying on springs, allowed the engine to rev higher and hold power further up the range. By 2005, the Desmosedici was regularly hitting 330 kilometers per h at Mugello. Valentino Rossi, racing his Yamaha past it with growing frustration, acknowledged the obvious. The Ducati straight-line advantage was real, significant, and growing. The red machine had not come to MotoGP to participate. It had come to redefine the speed ceiling. Number 10. The 800cc revolution. When regulations cut engine size from 990cc to 800cc for 2007, Honda's V5 was abandoned. A new V4 architecture, the RC212V, was designed from scratch. Honda's solution was extraordinary. Make the engine rev higher than almost any motorcycle engine in racing history. The RC212V reportedly approached 20,000 revolutions per minute under race conditions, producing an estimated 215 to 225 horsepower from just 800cc. Danny Pedrosa, the diminutive Spaniard, perhaps the most aerodynamically efficient rider on the grid, clocked a stunning 349.3 kilometers per h at Mugello in 2009. For an 800cc engine, that was a statement heard across the entire paddock. Shrink the engine if you must. Honda would spin it faster, build it lighter, and extract every last Newton meter from every cubic centimeter available. The RC212V won championships with Casey Stoner in 2011 and Marc Marquez in 2013. Honda's engineering culture refused to accept compromise, And in its finest moments, the RC212V showed exactly why. Number 9. The missile from Borgo Panigale. When the 800cc regulations arrived, most expected Ducati to struggle. Their philosophy of maximum revs and maximum power seemed ill-suited to a smaller displacement. They did not struggle. The Desmosedici GP7 pushed the 800cc V4 to approximately 19,500 revolutions per minute, some 1,500 revolutions per minute beyond what rival manufacturers were achieving. The result was a motorcycle with a top-speed advantage that no other machine could match in qualifying trim. Casey Stoner, in his first season with the factory team, experienced something close to terror at the first test. He later revealed his immediate thought was that he had made a colossal mistake signing with Ducati. Then he found something within himself. He tamed the GP7 through sheer ability, adapting his technique to the machine rather than waiting for the machine to adapt to him. He won 10 races that season. He won the championship at Motegi 4 rounds before the season ended, Ducati's first ever MotoGP title. Valentino Rossi, watching from second place, acknowledged there was simply too much difference between their bikes in the straight. The GP7 was maddening, brilliant, and faster than anything else in a straight line, and it was only the beginning of Ducati's speed narrative. After my first laps on the bike, my thought was, what have I done? I have made a huge mistake, but once you understand it, it is like nothing else on earth. Casey Stoner. Number 8. Back to 1,000. By 2012, the pendulum swung again. MotoGP opened back up to 1,000cc engines and Ducati answered first and loudest. The GP12 arrived with a 1,000cc V4 producing an estimated 255 to 265 horsepower, regularly touching speeds approaching 350 km per h at Mugello. There was, however, a problem. The GP12 had a handling deficit that made it brutally difficult to ride outside a narrow operating window. Jorge Lorenzo, Valentino Rossi, Nicky Hayden, all tried. All found themselves at war with the machine as much as with the competition. Yet through those painful seasons, Ducati's engineers were learning where the speed went to waste, learning what aerodynamics needed to do, learning what a truly complete motorcycle around a full circuit had to look like. They were building the intellectual architecture for a revolution. It was a painful few seasons, but when the revolution came, it would change MotoGP forever. Number 7. The greatest weapon. In 2013, Marc Marquez arrived in MotoGP and, at 20 years old, won the World Championship in his first season on the Honda RC213V. No rookie had done this in the modern four-stroke era. He won again in 2014, in 2016, in 2018. By 2019, a 6-time champion. The RC213V in Marquez's hands was the most successful racing motorcycle of its generation. The Honda was built on a fundamental principle, all-round performance, weighted toward the brilliance of the rider handling it. The engine produced an estimated 250 to 260 horsepower, paired with a chassis that demanded extraordinary physical commitment. The RC213V was known for being difficult, requiring a rider willing to push through instabilities that other machines would have resolved electronically. Jack Miller clocked 356.4 km per h at Mugello in 2021 on a machine from this lineage. Honda could make speed. What they had built was a high-wire act, extraordinary in its capability, terrifying in its demands. The moment you start thinking about what happens if you do not make it, that is the moment you do not make it. On the RC213V, that was not rhetoric. It was survival strategy. Number 6. The wings that changed everything. In 2015, Ducati appeared at a test session with something attached to the fairing that made the entire paddock stop and stare. Wings. Small carbon fiber aerodynamic winglets mounted at the sides of the fairing. The kind of thinking that belonged to Formula One cars and jet aircraft, not motorcycles. Ducati's chief engineer Gigi Dall'Igna had worked through the principle. Downforce at the front would counteract the wheelie tendency that wasted power during acceleration. A motorcycle that could keep its front wheel on the ground under full throttle could accelerate harder, earlier, and faster. The GP16 arrived in 2016 with an aggressive winglet package. Andrea Iannone, in some ways the most naturally aggressive Ducati rider since Stoner, exploited the straight-line advantage to the maximum. At Mugello in 2016, he clocked 354.9 kilometers per h, a new outright top speed record for MotoGP. The reaction from rivals was immediate: protests, rule changes, and eventually a ban on the most extreme winglet designs. But the genie was out of the bottle. Every manufacturer was now forced to develop aerodynamic solutions, not just for maximum speed, but for maximum acceleration. Ducati had started the war. Number 5. The Mugello missile. By 2018, the Desmosedici had shed its reputation as fast, but uncontrollable. Under Dal Igna's engineering leadership, the aerodynamic package was restructured, the chassis balance refined, the electronics transformed into a platform riders could genuinely trust. The result was the GP18. Andrea Dovizioso set a new top speed record of 356.4 kilometers per h in Free Practice 2 at Mugello on June 1, 2018. He broke his own record in the race at 356.5 kilometers per h. Then, in the 2019 Italian GP, he broke it again, 356.7 kilometers per h. 3 successive all-time top speed records at the same circuit. The Desmosedici was in a class of its own. 3 records, 1 venue, 1 era. The red machine was still ahead, still faster, still hungry. It always makes you dream, and it is special to reach such great numbers. However, sincerely, the feeling does not change much if you are going 346 or 357 kilometers per hour. Andrea Dovizioso. Number 4. The Orange Uprising. There is something historically remarkable about KTM's entry into this countdown. When they arrived in MotoGP in 2017, they were considered a curiosity, an ambitious Austrian manufacturer synonymous with off-road racing, daring to enter the most demanding arena in motorcycle sport. Their first seasons were genuinely difficult. By 2021, the story had completely changed. Johan Zarco lined up at the Lusail International Circuit in Qatar for the opening round of the 2021 season and clocked 362.4 kilometers per h in Free Practice 4. A new all-time MotoGP top speed record, demolishing the previous mark of 356.7 kilometers per h that had stood since 2019. That gap was not just 6 numbers on a timing screen. It represented a step change in aerodynamic and engine development across the entire grid. New low-drag aero configurations, revised electronics mapping, new fuel formulations, and most significantly, new challengers. The era when only Ducati could threaten the speed record was over. KTM had arrived at the front of the arms race, and they had not come to admire the view. Number 3, the resurrection. Of all the stories in this countdown, Aprilia's may be the most extraordinary. A manufacturer that left MotoGP at the end of 2004, returned as a full factory entry for 2015, and spent years in the lower half of the order, before engineering one of the greatest comebacks in the sport's history. The RSGP in 2022 and 2023 represented years of patient development by a relatively small engineering team operating with a fraction of Honda's or Yamaha's resources. Alex Espargaro transformed from a career satellite rider into a podium contender, finishing second in the 2022 World Championship, Aprilia's best ever MotoGP result by an enormous margin. Then Mugello 2023. In the sprint race, Maverick Vinales, who had found new life at Aprilia after struggling to harness the Yamaha, clocked 363.6 kilometers per h on the RSGP, third fastest speed ever recorded in MotoGP at that point, on a motorcycle from a manufacturer written off by paddock pundits for years. Aprilia had not just returned to MotoGP, they had arrived in the speed records.
When I signed for Aprilia, people thought I was crazy. Maybe I was, but we believed. You have to believe in something even when the numbers say you are wrong. Alex Espargaro. Number 2. The Red Emperor. By 2022, the Ducati Desmosedici was no longer just the fastest motorcycle in MotoGP. It was the benchmark every other manufacturer measured themselves against. 7 of the 11 teams on the grid ran Ducati-powered machines. The GP22 and GP23 were, in terms of outright performance, the most technically complete MotoGP motorcycles ever built up to that point. In the 2022 Italian GP, Jorge Martin, on a satellite Pramac Ducati, clocked 363.6 kilometers per h during the race under full competitive conditions. The following year, Enea Bastianini reached 364.8 kilometers per h in the 2023 sprint, the fastest Ducati ever, the second fastest MotoGP speed ever recorded at that moment. The GP23 produced an estimated 270 to 280 horsepower. Its aerodynamic package included front-wing systems, rear-wing elements, and a whole-shot device, a mechanism that lowers the rear during launch to prevent wheelies and maximize acceleration. Francesco Bagnaia won back-to-back world championships in 2022 and 2023 on it. At Mugello, it was the closest thing in motorcycle racing to a perfect instrument of speed. And yet, on that same Saturday afternoon when Bastianini hit 364.8 kilometers per h, there was one motorcycle on the same straight that went faster. Number 1. The fastest motorcycle in MotoGP history, June 10, 2023. Mugello, the sprint race. 37 editions of the Italian Grand Prix have been held at this circuit. The 5.245-kilometer lap, with its sweeping elevation-changing curves and the 1.1-kilometer main straight, has always been a cathedral for top speed in MotoGP. On this day, history was not merely being made, it was being shattered. Brad Binder, Red Bull KTM Factory Racing, motorcycle, the KTM RC16, V4 engine officially credited at 295 horsepower, seamless gearbox, carbon brakes, and an aerodynamic package developed with the precision of engineers who knew they had found something extraordinary. On the main straight, Binder found a slipstream. He pressed deep into the throttle. The RC16, dismissed, mocked, and underestimated for years, accelerated with a ferocity that the timing sensors could barely process, not merely beating the previous record, obliterating it by more than 2 kilometers per hour, not in a controlled test, not on a closed airfield, in a race, on a Saturday afternoon in Tuscany. When Binder was asked whether the RC16 had hit its electronic rev limiter during the run, his reply stunned the paddock. He had not hit the limiter yet. There were still more kilometers per hour available. Then came 2024, the same circuit, the same straight. Practice for the Italian Grand Prix. Paul Espargaro, returning on a KTM wildcard entry, lined up his RC16 and went to work. When the session ended, the timing screen showed one number, 366.1, exactly matching Binder's record. 2 KTM RC16 machines, 2 seasons, 2 riders, one identical extraordinary number, undefeated at the top of MotoGP history. The RC16's dominance in the speed trap was not accidental. It was the product of a philosophical commitment KTM made entering MotoGP. They would not chase the established manufacturers by copying their approach. They would find their own path, built around a V4 in a specific 75-degree configuration, giving unique upper rev range characteristics, an aerodynamic package treated as a central performance pillar rather than an afterthought, and years absorbing lessons other manufacturers learned at great cost. The result was the fastest motorcycle ever to compete in a MotoGP race weekend. Honestly, I have not hit the limiter yet, so clearly there are still a couple of Ks there for us. The bike is a rocket and it feels so good. Brad Binder. The limit does not exist. We began this journey with a sound, a shockwave, and now you know the machines that created it. 15 motorcycles, born from the most relentless technological arms race in two-wheeled motorsport history. From the untamed chaos of the Yamaha YZR500 to the surgical precision of the KTM RC16. From 315 kilometers per hour to 366. From riders guided by instinct alone to riders backed by data, simulations, and machines that can predict a corner before it even exists. And yet, here's the truth. After every simulation, every wind tunnel hour, every line of code written in pursuit of speed, it still comes down to one thing: a human being. A human being who has to hold on when 300 horsepower explodes through the rear tire, who has to brake from 366 kilometers per h into a corner that arrives faster than fear itself, who leans so far into the edge of physics that knee and elbow hover millimeters above the asphalt at 200. No algorithm does that. No computer feels that. The engineers will keep pushing. The machines will keep evolving. 370 will fall, then 375, then something even more absurd. But no matter how far technology goes, there will always be a rider. Someone who decided, long before logic had a say, that speed wasn't a choice. It was the only thing that ever made sense. As Valentino Rossi once said, riding a race bike is an art. Something you do because you feel something inside. And that feeling, that unmeasurable, untouchable human fire, is what sends a rider down a straight at 366 kilometers per hour, not because a system told them to, but because every fiber of their being refuses to be anything less than the fastest thing alive in that moment. The limit doesn't exist. It never did. It only moves.